Welcome to the first Pastors Getting Personal podcast with me, Dave Novak. And the time that we have here together and what we're trying to accomplish with our podcast is to really have casual, unscripted conversation with lead pastors. And it's not an interview. We're not trying to have a static interview, but really just talk live, bounce around from different issue to issue, and to be able to celebrate some wins and hear some great things, but also talk about some things that we, as pastors have to push through and fight through, and God just helps us with the rest. And so I'm excited. This is a very first episode we have, and I'm excited to welcome Pastor Jared Ellis from E2 Church here in Elk Grove. And man, he's the more I spend time with Pastor Jared, the more I just learn about him and all of the different ministry ventures and stuff that he has been a part of. And yeah, man, welcome. I'm glad that I'm really excited that you're coming in. You're the first one, dude.
I'm honored. I didn't realize it was the first one. So thank you so much for having me. It's a privilege and an honor. Anytime we get to talk, it's always blesses me. And anytime we get to share that with other people, other pastors, I think it's gonna make an impact. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, and so if you're someone you're not, you're almost said your dad. Your pastor's on here and you're not a pastor and watching. My heart would be is that people, when they're watching, would have a heart for their pastors, other pastors, to be able to say, hey man, I need to jump in and be an encourager, or to be encouraged by pastors, because I just want us to be seen in humanity.
Yeah, it's needed, man. I think real conversations in church, especially for high-level leaders. It's so easy to do the polished fake, put on your smile and pretend everything's good. And I mean, let's talk about the wins, let's talk about successes, but sometimes it's just good to know, man, like, you're having a bad day too, because I have those. I'm a real person. And so I think breaking those barriers, I love what you're doing with this. I think it's going to be really powerful, and it's just going to get better from here. Hopefully we can have some good conversations, get to the real meat of some stuff today.
Yeah, because like we had coffee a little while back, and, I have coffee with a lot of pastors all the time because that's just what I like to do.
That's what we do. I don't know what it is, the coffee thing. That's our thing. But we do
and it's just, fun to talk like, hey, what's really going on and what's really happening. And so
wait a second. I need to ask you this. So, because we had coffee, I think it was a Starbucks, right?
Yeah. It was
you are a Starbucks guy?
Yeah.
That's your drink.
No. Well, wait a minute. I like Temple Coffee, Old Soul.
Okay.
And so some of those, but typically my hustle, my office go-to is Starbucks.
So I went to Starbucks today for the first time probably in months.
Really?
And it's because...
Are you even a Christian, bro?
Well, I go to... I'm a bit bougie when it comes to my coffee. I like single origin. I want a single origin bean. But my creative director told me that Starbucks started brewing a single origin.
They do. So they had Ethiopian, right? Did you have it?
So I went and I asked for the single origin and I started drinking it and I was like, this is trash. And then I looked at the label.
I thought you were going to be like, this is great.
They gave me the blonde roast. They didn't even give me the... Come on, Starbucks. Y'all supposed to be getting it together. The CEO is supposed to have... So I got to try it again because Ethiopian single origin.
They have this... Yeah, they have that there ever since... Because I don't like Pike.
Yeah.
And I don't... some of that's just blah. But, Oh, yeah.
I got to try it out. But I was so excited today. And then they didn't give it to me. So
what's the... because I know you've done a lot of traveling. What's the coffee? What country have you been in? You had a coffee and it was like really impressed. Like you're like, man, that was good stuff.
So
dude.
Here's the crazy thing: Sacramento coffee scene is phenomenal. People don't know we've got a good coffee scene. Yeah, Sacramento is up there in some of the better cities that I've had coffee in. Especially for the size of our city, like we have a lot of coffee expression. So. I mean, I think Temple Coffee is one of the best I've ever had. I believe their brew, the way their beans are great. I mean, coffee in New Zealand was pretty incredible. Now, I don't know if it was because it was New Zealand, and I mean, I saw these beautiful green pastures and the vibe of the city.
Yeah.
But coffee there was really cool. I mean, they do like the flat whites before it hit America, and that was like a unique thing.
They did it before, huh?
Yeah, flat white is kind of more of a. Yeah, we didn't used to use that term here in America. It's just basically a latte.
Yeah.
But so that New Zealand was pretty good. I mean, coffee in like Europe It depends. When I was in Greece last year, the coffee is super grainy, so it's like a bunch of grounds at the bottom. Which, if you're not used to that, it's pretty rough. But I enjoy it. It is what it is. But I love coffee right here, Sacramento. I think is great.
Yeah, you know what? I think Temple is one of my go-tos, and then even some of them just the ambiance, like Old Soul downtown in the alley. You
Mast is great, and they work with a lot of churches here in town.
What's it called?
Mast. Yeah, so we started brewing their coffee when we launched a church, but I'm pretty sure they've built out coffee shops in churches, multiple churches here in Sacramento. I know they were working with JC for a while, and so Mast Coffee is great.
So then, churches here in Sacramento, how do you spell Mast?
Mast, M-A-S-T.
Yep. M-A-S-T. They help with coffees in churches and church bar, or not church bar.
Coffee church bars. Hey, that's what we do. That's our bar. That's our version of a bar.
They keep it coffee. So that's cool, man. Well, hey, let me, I like to have a bio for everyone that comes so you can kind of get background on someone, and then we just jump into casual conversation.
Yeah, let's do it.
Pastor Jared Ellis is a pastor, communicator, songwriter, and author. As the senior pastor of E2 Church in Sacramento, California, he has helped grow the church plant into a rapidly growing next generation movement, which I want to make sure we touch on that. Through E2 Worship, he has written and released original music across multiple albums. With over 19 years of ministry experience, he has worked with some of the most influential churches and movements in the world. He holds a degree from Ecclesia College in Practical Ministry and Christian Leadership, and is the author of Yes, Simple Response, Radical Results. And then Faith Journey Exponential, that's a different book, right? Mm-hmm. Faith Journey Exponential, a discipleship guide, and his latest book, How to Become a Prayer Warrior, which you gave me these, man, when you came in. This is awesome. So this is How to Become a Prayer Warrior. This just came out like not even 6 months ago, right?
It's about a year now.
Is it really?
Yeah, so we released it last year for 21 Days of Prayer, 21 chapters. So especially in the beginning of the year, we wanted something for people to be able to use as a guide. And so,
that's awesome, man. So that's that one, and then Yes is right here. So we'll have to put that in the comments, or not the comments, but the intro for this, so that people have it.
Absolutely.
But so one thing I wanted to mention, because first off, E2, what is that?
Yeah, E2 Church, planted almost 8 years ago.
But the E2, what is?
Yeah, stands for Ephesians 2, made alive in Christ, which is our vision statement, so that people far from God will be made alive in Christ.
Nice.
And so, we launched 8 years ago, coming 2 weeks, so we'll be celebrating 8 years, and it's been a wild journey here in Sacramento. In the middle of a building expansion project. God's growing the church, 4 services. Just this past Sunday, 74 people got saved on Sunday alone. And so God's moving. We're blessed and looking forward to the future. It's been a wild ride, but here we are.
So when you took the church, because wasn't it kind of existing before, or it was something different?
Kind of a different story. So the church was a small group of people who were connected with Elevation Church in Charlotte, North Carolina, which I have a history with, was working on staff there years ago. And they were trying to do this kind of extension model where they were like showing the video from Pastor Stephen here locally. It was really not getting off to a good start. Yeah. People thought Pastor Stephen was preaching here in person, and so they're like, "You're lying." And so it wasn't growing. Nice. Things were struggling. It was hard. Elevation's model is so connected to the live stream, and doing that on the West Coast from Charlotte to Sacramento was really difficult.
Oh, yeah.
And so they were really at a point where they had to make a decision. Do we close down the church, shut our doors, kind of walk away, or do we decide to do something new and fresh in Sacramento? So this kind of small group really wanted to keep moving forward with something that wasn't Elevation, but something new. And so they decided to launch a church, and I had a relationship with Q, who was at the time leading the extension site, and we had developed a friendship in Charlotte years ago. And he called me and said, "Hey, we're thinking about launching a church. Would you want to plant it with us and be the senior pastor?" Wow. And I said, "No, I have no interest in coming to Sacramento." I'd been to Sacramento before. I'm from New York, and it's like a little big town. And so I was not interested. But when I came out here and visited and I met the people and I saw what God was doing here in the city, I felt moved. And so decided to jump in the planting process. So I was an itinerant speaker at the time. So I was traveling full time and I was booked every weekend until August of 2017, and the church launched in February. So I would travel back and forth from Dallas to Sacramento throughout that season to help them get the church off the ground, meet with the leaders, develop the strategies, and then finally I moved in August, and then the rest is history. So that's kind of a little bit of a brief history of the story of how we started as a church.
So share about, your traveling ministry and how you got into that. I don't know where you want to start, but just how you got into that area of ministry and it took off, and then the different circles you've been able to run in and get in with some influential people.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. So I've always kind of carried like that traveling message of revival. Even when I was a teenager, when I got called into ministry, I would travel around New York and preach at different churches. Throughout my Bible college career, I did that. And years later, after being a youth pastor, all those kind of vocational church ministry positions, I felt the Lord kind of call me into a season of that full time. So I was at Elevation Church on staff, stepped away from that, moved back to Dallas, Texas.
What'd you do at Elevation?
I worked with campus ministries as well as the youth ministry at the time. So helped bring a portable campus into a permanent facility, as well as kind of get the youth ministry to a new stage of where they were meeting regularly, and worked with some just amazing people there. And so moved back to Dallas and worked actually as a professor at the Bible college I attended, so Christ for the Nations. I taught in the youth ministry department, served in my local church, Trinity Church, which is an amazing AG church out there right in Cedar Hill. Okay. And then started traveling. It was a really slow start in the beginning. If you've ever been a part of the itinerant world or tried to step into that, it's like, man, it feels like nothing's happening.
And I'm in the thick of it right now.
Pretty much for almost a year, it felt like there was just nothing. I mean, small little speaking engagements here and there. But there comes a point when you walk in something by faith for enough time where the rubber really hits the road. And it was that moment where I wanted to quit. I wanted to just throw in the towel. And I put my head down and said, God, I'm just going to continue to believe the word you said. And it was literally within 1 week, I went from nothing to having an entire month booked back to back to back. And really from that month, there was not a weekend where I was not in a different city preaching, whether it was a conference, a camp, a church service, convention, something. And God just began to open doors. I had some really incredible friends at the time that helped open doors for me and vouch for me but I think it was years of just faithfulness, of stewarding the call. And so for about 2 years, full-time itinerant, just traveled the country preaching at different churches and conferences, and had some really incredible experiences, had some really bad experiences. I'm talking about like camps, staying with the kids in the bunkhouse and with a sleeping bag. And I mean, we've done all that stuff. Not knowing
when you went there.
Not knowing anything. And being surprised to say, hey, did you pack a sleeping bag all the way from Dallas? No, I didn't. Dude. And so, just that kind of stuff. So, paid my dues and then all the way up to some amazing large conferences. And then eventually, 2 years of that, and was an incredible season. Yeah. That was when I kind of felt the transition to, hey, senior leadership. I feel called to plant something, build a local church. And so ended up transitioning into local church, as a senior pastor. Yeah. So I still travel here and there,
right?
But a lot less. My focus is the church here. So
your main thrust of your ministry, just speaking and itinerating, was revival, pretty much, or what did?
Yeah, I mean that was the message, the revival, kind of the fire starter thing. Yeah. I wouldn't say that I was just known for that. I mean, I preached, at all different types of church services, right. But that definitely was the thing I carried. Like let's kind of get on fire, and so then just through word of mouth and connections, I also somehow. I don't know how this happened, but I broke into the Spanish-speaking churches world. And so I preached at a ton of Spanish churches where I would preach with a translator.
It's so hard, isn't it?
I would preach to the
man?
youth ministry on Friday night, which was English, because most Spanish churches, their youth ministries are English.
Right.
And then the church on Sunday, the big church, would be in Spanish. And yeah, sometimes.
So, hey everyone, in the summer of 2023, I left my church to launch a new ministry, which you're about to see. If you'd like to partner together, my website is davenovakministries.com. Check it out. What if I told you that you could break free from the wounds and the frustrations with your dad? You know, the resentment, the abandonment, the abuse that you have felt maybe, or even you get to a place of having bitterness that is built up, or you feel cheated because of your relationship with your dad. Hi, I'm Dave Novak, and I recently wrote a book called No More Dad Issues. And the reason I did was because I struggled with these issues for years. And I learned over time that in our culture and in our generation, dad issues are pervasive throughout. It doesn't matter who you are, and it doesn't discriminate. I've known people in their latter years who still are feeling the sting of dad issues because you never grow out of them. And so when I wrote this book, I decided to be very transparent with my feelings, my thoughts, my struggles in this bitter and difficult relationship that I had with my dad, who was also a pastor. And so I found this freedom. I'm going to tell you how I went through it, how I got through it, so that you can have it as well. I wrote No More Dad Issues so that you can find what I have found. So pick up a copy and let's begin to break free today.
Times it would be tough. Other times I actually loved it. And I remember I preached at this one church, ICM in Laredo, Texas. Big church, Pastor Sam, just doing an amazing job out there. And I remember he introduced me to the guy who was going to be translating for me. Older gentleman. I mean, we're talking probably like 60s. And I was like, you have heard me preach, right? Like I pace, I'm fast.
Right.
And he's like, I got you, Pastor. This dude, every mannerism, every inflection, I mean, he was tied to the hip.
Wow.
And one of the best translators.
Really?
I don't know what he said. He could have said something that was completely different.
Yeah, right.
But he was amazing. So lots of that stuff too. And that was real fun, and getting exposed to a whole different style of church and in the Spanish church. And so, yeah, I've been all over. It's been a lot of fun.
So, where was I going? When you tell us a little bit about starting E2, you came in, where it was at, and then because man, you have such. It's really exciting to see, because I've been to your church a handful of times. It's exciting to see the momentum that's carrying.
Yeah.
My daughter goes to your church. She loves your church, man.
We love her. She's
And
amazing.
She loves you.
I loved hearing that she was like, Dad, we need to go down to LA. That was so cool to see you post about that.
Yeah. She just, he's referring to the fires, and my daughter, we were watching, just days after the Pacific Palisades fire happened, and people were just trying to do something, whether it's churches or individuals, and my daughter and I are watching the news on a Saturday morning, and at 10:30, and she said, Dad, we should go. And so it's not like me to just do something like that, but I wasn't speaking the next day, nor did I have to pastor a church. Yeah. So we took off on Saturday at noon, an hour and a half later, and we went down to LA Saturday night. We served once we got there, woke up the next day, went to church at Fearless, and then we served the rest of the day. They had a big racetrack in Santa Anita. Thousands of people were dumping off stuff, and thousands were showing up for stuff. And so we worked real hard. We did everything, and then we turned around and came home Sunday night.
It's amazing.
And dude, it was I was really proud of my daughter and just her heart, and just to see her get in there, and she's a leader more than she knows,
for sure.
But anyway, so so the momentum of the church right now, because you got into the building where you are, and now you guys are expanding. Just what's been the journey, and maybe even something you've been learning along the way that.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, it's. I mean,
there's probably no lessons.
Yeah, it's nothing. No, it's been a journey. So when I came in, So Q, the guy that was leading the church at the time, we developed a friendship in Charlotte. And I hated the guy when I met him. The dude annoyed me. He was one of those like, you're too happy for it to be real. I'm a New Yorker, so I'm pretty cynical. I'm like, there's no way anybody
like
that
from
happy.
New York City?
From Long Island, New York.
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
yeah. So, I really wrestled with Q when I first met him. Over time, we kind of developed a friendship. I started to realize that this guy actually is the real deal. And so when I came out here, he was leading the church because I wasn't here yet. And so I was leading it behind the scenes, but I said, look, why don't you take on the senior role until I get there? And then within a year's time, we'll switch just to give me some equity with the church to build some relationships. Yeah. So we did that. And about a year in, the church is blowing up. Our first Easter, we have over 1,000 people.
And you went in with like 60? Is that what it was?
Not even. It was probably about like 30 to 40. Yeah.
And it was mainly Asian?
It was all Asian. Yeah, it was basically an Asian church.
Filipino and...
there was Chinese, Hmong, Vietnamese.
Interesting, man.
Yeah, so it was very different culture. Church starts blowing up. It's exploding. And then we just hit a bunch of snags. I took over as a senior pastor. We had a pretty ugly split at the beginning, and had to walk through some growth challenges as well. We were meeting at Cosumnes River College, which is a local college here, and we were promised to take over the gym where we could really grow into that 1,000 number that we were hitting. And the school just shut us down, forced us to meet in this tiny little room that barely fit 250, and that mixed with some of the stuff that was happening early on with the split, it was a really challenging year. At the time, I was engaged to Q's sister, and so so I was like, man, I got to lock this guy in.
That's why you had to clean it up with him, man. That's why you had to.
No, so the crazy thing is that Q and I, we've always been like this, and forever. We're brothers, literally and figuratively. Throughout that, I don't think I would have made it through that season without him. Yeah. But there was, a lot of dynamics happening, and it was pretty heavy. And so it's crazy. At the time, we were in talks with this facility here about moving in, taking a lease, and because of the split and because of all the growth hindrances, we couldn't afford it because there was nothing there. It was basically an empty space. We were going to have to build. It was going to be about a $700,000 project for a building we don't own. And so I tried to back out of it. And because of some crazy situations, lawsuits, all this crazy stuff goes down. And so we end up having to get locked into this facility. I'm paying the lease on this building. I'm paying for the school. Yeah, dude, I mean, it's a wild season. And so, but God carried us through, man. We grew. Those people left. It was a good thing. We got healthy. The church grew back. We build to a place. We raise money, build this facility. Neighborhood blitzes, get the invites out, grow. Opening Sunday, COVID Sunday. Oh, so we invite everybody to the building, and nobody shows up because
we moved into a building the same month that we were ready to go, and it's like, what for?
Yep, it was wild.
I get it, man.
And that building stayed closed for about a year. We were closed for about a year, and so we did everything online, made it through COVID, and honestly, for us, I'll be real, our church grew online while we had the doors closed. We opened up like house churches and had people meeting, doing watch parties. Revival hits people's houses. People that would have never walked into our church shows up at these houses. And so when we did finally open the doors, the church explodes with growth. And so from that point to where we are now, we're running 4 services. We're expanding 16,000 square feet. So we're building a 700-seat auditorium right now in the same facility. So we'll expand the whole thing. The church has just continued to skyrocket in growth. And I think it's because we stewarded that season. I think we stewarded that COVID season well. Yeah. And we played the long game. I think a lot of people felt this urgency. We got to get back in the building. And I have no qualms about how people led. You lead the church the way you needed to.
Right.
But I think for us, with our demographic, we're extremely diverse church. We looked at kind of where the landscape was in our city and said, you know what, we can continue to do things the way we're doing it, empower people where they are, not jerk people back and forth between coming back and going closed.
Yeah.
And I think that built a reputation in Sacramento. If there's one thing I've learned about pastoring in Sacramento, I moved here from Dallas.
Right.
And in Dallas, Texas, you plant a new church, boom, there's a lot of people. People love new church plants. It's exciting.
Right.
Here in Sacramento, people care about reputation. They care that you have a name that has a reputable character, that you're in it for the long haul.
Yeah.
They want to know that you're not kind of a firecracker, just, shooting star. And I came in thinking, we're going to take over. It's going to be, and we got humbled really early on from a lot of heavy hitting seasons. And I think I needed it as a senior leader to humble me. I also learned that pastoring is a long game. It's base hits. It's 1 week after the other, just doing the right thing. And I think now we are seeing 8 years in, which it took a lot longer than I would have liked, but 8 years in, we're starting to finally see the harvest of that. We're critical mass. Just this past Sunday, standing room in all 4 services, 74 salvations, Holy Ghost is moving, hitting the church. And so,
what's your average attendance right now on Sundays?
We're seeing anywhere between 1,300 to 1,500 on a weekend.
So
and and that's just, people that sometimes come once a month. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
if
how
you
big
get
the
on
church
them all on
is,
the same Sunday,
we have no idea what the church size
Right.
truly is. And for us, it's not about numbers, but numbers help, show milestones of where God has brought us. Because it feels like just yesterday we were trying to break 400 and 500. I remember those conversations. I feel like it was yesterday. And now, here we are where, we don't even know what we're going to do for Easter. We don't know what's going to happen for Easter because we don't have the new space yet. And so,
do you think it's kind of fun though, not knowing?
No, it's not fun. No, it's not fun.
Because for me, sometimes it was like, it's kind of, it's scary. But at the same time, it's like, we don't know, and God's going to figure this thing. And I'm not like fly by the seat of your pants person.
You're way more Pentecostal than I am in that.
I try to all right, how can we embrace this, man, instead of freaking out? Because I'm a, control freak.
I think there are things I like not knowing. When it comes to facilitating people, for me, that's a big deal. Yeah. We treat every guest as a VIP. We want you to have the greatest experience. Yeah. I never want to turn people away. And doing things like praise party where we've got one service, and it's packed. I just hate the idea that we would have to turn people away. I always want to make room. Yeah. That's something, we'll go to 4 services. We'll go to 5. We'll do whatever we've got to do.
Right.
But not knowing what we're going to do for Easter is it's stress I would not like to have. But by the grace of God, in Jesus' name, hey, right now the city is looking at our permits and plans. In Jesus' name, they're going to approve it. We're going to build this thing and get it done. So
and what date is Easter on? April?
Easter is late in April this year, so we got some time.
Oh, nice.
Thankfully, it's not early. But
Bro, as a lead pastor, I knew it all. I can't even believe I'm at a place where I don't even know when Easter is.
It's a privilege. It's a beautiful thing. Yeah,
so, hey, what was your coming from the type of ministry you had before, going into senior pastoring? What was probably, I don't know, one or a couple of the lessons, tough transitions for you of, okay, I'm out here doing this, and now I'm lead pastor, and how was what were some of the changes?
There's so many. I think one of the biggest things I realized coming from being an itinerant speaker, and before that I was a worship pastor, I was a youth pastor, I was an executive pastor. I'd done those roles. I worked for organizations, oversaw a camp of 5,000 teenagers every summer. I'd done those positions, but I'd never been planted in a place that I was intending to be there for the rest of my life, Yeah. And so I think one of the major lessons that senior pastoring has taught me is that it really doesn't matter how gifted you are. Gifting matters in the beginning. When you're first starting out, people, it's attractive. They like something fresh. They want it, and I'm not saying that gifting doesn't matter at all. It definitely does.
Right.
But at the end of the day, if you're planted somewhere, people get tired of gifting. Gifting gets old. Yeah. And if you don't have the character to back it up, if you don't have the longevity to stay through, if you don't have a pastoral heart to walk with people through their journeys, their losses, their successes, gifting, what gifting will do is it'll attract people and then it'll burn them, because the only thing that you're making space for is your gifting. You're not actually making space for a church to grow, for people to thrive and flourish.
That's
and
good.
So I had to learn that, yes, gifting is important, but what really matters is being present, being pastoral, loving people, getting rid of ego, being a real person.
Yeah.
It's not about green rooms. It's about being with people in the lobby. You know, when I really try to do this, at the end of every service, I run as fast as I can to that door and I just shake everybody's hand on their way out. Because
Nice.
I can't have meaningful conversations with 1,500 people,
Right.
but I can at least say hi to you.
Yeah.
And I always love to see people surprised to see me there. I was just on stage and now I'm shaking
Right,
their hands.
that's so cool,
I
yeah.
never want to let go of that.
Yeah.
I always want you to know, hey, I'm with you. I'm right here. I'm a real person. And so I think that lesson's been really valuable for
Yeah.
me.
So going back to church split, because I experienced one when I was pastoring too. And for me, I remember it caught me by surprise. And, you know, I remember going through that season, like, what just happened? I didn't even see that coming. I thought we were good. And I was I still couldn't figure it out. And I think people in our church were kind of confused what's going on or whatever. And I didn't even know things that were happening aside from me. And I remember going through that season and I was shocked. And I'm like, I'm not mad. I'm not sad. I don't even know what to feel. And the only thing was, for me, I knew, just keep your consistency. Just keep going along, keep your joy, keep feeding people, keep, and helping them. And I mean, it was a season of confusion for me, and it was hard, but I think there was some grace that God had too of, don't worry, we're going to get through this. Yeah. But for you, what was it like? I mean, from the learning curve to how it just affected you and your heart?
Yeah, I mean, there were days where I was on the floor. My wife, my fiance at the time, was holding me as I'm shaking, having a panic attack. The weight of that season was so heavy. I mean, it lasted for a good 9 months. Wow. And I think anytime something like that happens for the first time, it catches you off guard. I've been in church my whole life. It's not like I hadn't seen these things before. Yeah. It's different when you're the senior leader and everything falls on you. And it doesn't matter if you did something wrong or somebody else in the organization did something wrong. You are going to be blamed for it because you're the leader.
That's totally right.
And that is something I did not understand.
And you can't defend yourself because then it looks like you're...
No, you can't.
You got something
I think that's something I didn't understand because... I didn't do it. It wasn't me. I wasn't the one that.
Yeah.
And what I've learned now is that no matter what happens, because I am the senior leader, the buck stops at my desk, and people need somebody to blame. And unfortunately, that is the weight of leadership. Yeah. And if you're not ready to carry that weight, you're not ready to be a senior leader.
Right.
And I don't think I was. Number one, I don't think I was ready for that. But I think secondly too, I spent a lot of time trying to convince people to stay that needed to leave. As a young pastor, especially a young senior leader, you feel this pressure to convince people of your character and convince people that they should stick with you and they should stay and they should make it work. And I spent hours, I can't tell you, I mean, there are some coffee shops I cannot walk into because the PTSD is so real of the hours spent.
Boy, it really weighed heavy on you, huh? It hit you hard.
Hours spent trying to convince people, talking with them, counseling them. And now, years later, I look back and I laugh and just say, man, you should have just let them go early on because they weren't bought into me as a pastor. They weren't bought into the vision we were building. And if you're trying to convince people to be bought into something that is not already in their heart, You just have to be willing to say, you know what, there's another church in this city
Right.
that I guarantee you will grow in, you will thrive in, and it's not here.
Yeah.
And I love you. I love that pastor. I'm going to send you to that church.
Yeah.
Because I think you're going to receive so much better from them. And I had to become confident in myself that when somebody rejected me, I didn't take it personally.
So, hey, all of the pastors and leaders out there, since I wrote my book right here, Fearless Men, and it released in September of 24, and I've been on tour speaking at conferences and retreats and different men's events, the response has been pretty incredible. I'm now hearing that churches are using this book as curriculum for their men's events and their groups. And so if you'd like to partner and look at doing this as well, you can go to my website, davenovakministries.com. I'm continuing to plan and prep my schedule and calendar for 2025. And I'd love to be a part of what you're doing and bring fearless men to you and your men. Hit me up and maybe we'll book something.
Yeah.
It was part of being a leader, part of being a pastor, that not everybody's going to be called to what you're called to build.
Yeah.
And so it refined my confidence. I mean, I walk with a limp.
Yeah.
You never walk away from a situation like that the same.
Yeah.
I got some scars.
Yeah.
But I got some substance and I've got some stories.
That's good.
And I think I've learned how to carry the anointing aside from ego. You know, I don't have this prideful, you need to listen to me, you need to follow me thing anymore. When someone tries to rip a calling away from you and you see God protect it, you become more convinced that it's his church and not yours than ever before.
Right.
So I'm just convinced now, you know, when we walk through difficult staffing decisions or transitions in leadership, it's never easy, but I'm a lot more confident in making those decisions for the good of the calling, for the good of the church, and for the good of those people that, you know what, may not need to be here anymore.
Right. And you know, a couple things. One is I kind of try to hold on to the model of when, aside from even a church split, was ultimately in my heart, I just want people to be happy in the church they go to.
Right.
And if you're not happy at this one, let's get you in a happy one. I got a lot of, that's why I valued so much my pastoral friends. I'm like, this dude's cool,
Right.
you know, or I think you might enjoy this, or let me
Right.
give you a few ideas, because the last thing you want is in your church or anybody's church, you don't want people unhappy.
Nope.
And so if we can get people to be in a place where they're happy and they thrive, then it's all about the kingdom.
Right.
And that's
But
what's
in the
best.
beginning, that's hard, right? Because you're just
yeah.
trying to build something.
I mean, it takes the scars to be able to get to
Right.
that point to where
Right.
it's like your eyes are open, like, okay, this is kingdom thinking now.
Yep. But it's hard. In the beginning,
Yeah.
you're just trying to build something. And so when one person leaves, it feels like 100.
Yes.
You know, and it is. You wonder, are they going to influence this or that? But, you know, again, one of the reasons why I'm so grateful for the local church, so grateful for my journey as a senior pastor is, you know, we say this all the time. The church is the hope of the world. We believe in the local church.
Yeah.
I really believe that, not just because it benefits the people that come to my church. It has blessed my life.
Right.
I have learned humility. I have learned confidence. I've learned, you know, I remember early on when we planted the church and I heard of another church plant coming into town, I get nervous. Oh my gosh, are they going to take our people?
Right.
And you know what 8 years pastoring a church has done for me? Every time a church plant comes to our city, every other church grows. Without fail. I see it every time. So when
That's
a church
cool.
planter now wants to meet with me and they want to pitch the vision, I'm like, let's go. Come on, come right in.
Oh, dude,
Because
that's
it
dope.
blesses the city.
Yeah.
It blesses other churches. I didn't have that. I had that in theory. I heard that at our conferences. I heard other pastors say that, but I didn't believe it.
Right.
Now, 8 years later, I have seen it.
Dude.
I've watched it happen. And so I'm grateful for longevity. I'm grateful for those seasons of suffering and struggle, because it's created substance and confidence in me. And I believe it's what every person needs in their journey, is that longevity. Just stick with something and God's going to give you something that you couldn't get just when you start it or you begin it. It happens over time.
Right. So one thing I've noticed with your ministry that really stands out is, dude, you're able to, more than I've seen, like churches I've actually gone to and been around, is how much you are connecting with this younger generation. I mean, in a way that I can't even explain it. But you're hitting a nerve, and you're rocking it, dude. It's really fun to go in and see just the younger generation that's there and leading, not just like, watching. They're like on the front lines.
Yeah.
What has been your philosophy on and how you minister and how is, I don't know, just.
I think youth attracts youth, right? I started the church when I was 27, so I became a senior pastor. I'm 34.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Dude,
so, I mean, it's been, youth attracts youth. I think we also, our style of ministry, what we're building, we are very intentional about breaking paradigms and doing things that are not churchy in order to reach people. And so I'll be honest with you, and this is not an exaggeration.
Yeah.
I think this is the first year in our ministry, in year 7, 8, where we've actually started to draw some more established Christians to our church. Our church has predominantly, almost decisively grown from new believers and new growth. Wow. We made a very, very intentional decision from day one. Our mission is so that people far from God will be made alive in Christ. Yeah. If what we are doing does not fit into that vision of far from God, reaching people who don't know Jesus, then we don't do it. And that has caused a lot of frustration over the years with church people. Right. In fact, we've had a lot of people that grew up in church, PKs, that struggle in our church because I heard Darius Daniel said this at a conference I was at this past weekend, and it gave language to something that I have felt the past 7 years, 8 years, but I couldn't find language for it. He said, when it comes to why I'm so protective of how we facilitate the move of God in our church, I'm protective because I need my church to understand the difference between Pentecostal traditions and Spirit-filled experiences. They are not the same. I got filled with the Holy Ghost at 16 in a Pentecostal Church of God. Okay. I talk in tongues. I roll on the floor. I love all of that stuff. Yeah. I am not interested in recreating Pentecostal traditions. Right. Yeah. I'm not interested in doing what we did before and calling that a move of God because some people feel familiarity with it. Yeah. I want a new thing. I want a new move of God. And so I think for us, we have been really intentional with refusing to fall into that pattern of let's do what everybody else does because they do that. Yeah. And let's do what works for us in the city that we're in for the mission that we have. Yeah. In Sacramento, with the we are building a multi-ethnic, diverse church. Yeah. So we have a lot of different political ideologies. We have a lot of different church philosophies. We have Catholics, Pentecostals, Baptists, non-Christians in the room. And so how do we have a both and church? Yeah. Not either or. It's not either spirit or scripture. It is both and. Right. We are spirit filled and we are seeker sensitive. We do both. Yeah. And so I think that strategy has allowed us to reach a generation that's saying, I'm tired of what I've seen. I want something fresh and I want something new. But don't get me wrong. We got a lot of old people at our church because I'm a Bible guy. And when you hear me preach, I preach Bible, I preach doctrine, I preach theology, I know the word. Yeah. So the old folks, they hear the right things, but they also see that we're reaching their kids. Yeah. And that's why the older generation is in our church because their kids are coming to our church. That's good. And they're building their families in our church. So I wouldn't say we're doing anything groundbreaking. Churches all over the country, all over the world are doing it. We're just pretty stubborn about it. Yeah. Well, and I mean, it is just kind of the heartbeat of your church and what you see when you walk in right away. It's like, okay, this is different. The demographic and everything. Yep. What would you say is like the median age of your church? It's really hard. I mean, we are a church of young families. I think it's anywhere from that 30 to 40 range of families with small children. So we're talking anywhere from 2 to 7, ages. But we've got a great group of young adults. We've got what I call seasoned saints. We got older people as well. And so it is really hard, and the church is growing so fast that I honestly don't know. I can't even tell you what that median age is. I just know that it is diverse.
Right.
I mean, I'm telling you, I'm the minority in my church. It is a diverse church,
right,
and it is a diverse in age, background, church experience, ethnicity, all of that. We truly are fostering that at E2, and it's beautiful. I love it, and we fight for it as much as we possibly can.
Right. So you and your wife, oh my gosh, I just forgot. Trin. You guys have been married
about 5 years now.
About 5 years, and she is Vietnamese?
She is, yes.
Vietnamese.
Yep.
Okay, so you've been married that long. And how did you guys meet exactly? What did that look like?
Yeah, so we met through Q, which is my campus pastor now. So Trin is his sister. They were, when I first moved here, launching a restaurant in Sacramento. Oh. So my wife comes from the corporate world, from the business world. She does not come from ministry, and was newly saved when I moved here.
Really?
And so she had gotten saved when the church was Elevation. Got her little Elevation Bible, was on her faith journey.
So you're like borderline missionary.
So she grew up in Catholic church.
Got it.
Was very involved. Veered away. She went to UCLA. Just kind of walked away from the Lord there. Came back to Sacramento. Really got serious about her faith, and was kind of in that, like, she's on fire when I first moved here. But she and I were not options, because she was newly saved. And I'm like, I did not see her as potential.
Right.
I'm a pastor. She did not see me as potential. So we really built a friendship. They were launching the business. We're launching the church. We worked in the same environment. We were at Q's house. And so we were spending every day with each other and building friendships, getting to know each other, had no romantic desire for one another at all.
Wow.
And, she starts getting involved in the church. She's growing. She goes through my discipleship course, gets filled with the Holy Ghost. Starts prophesying. She's on fire. Dude. So then I'm starting to see her, and I'm like, okay, she doesn't carry that church baggage. She's not one of these weird Christian girls. She's running a restaurant. She's successful in business. And
what restaurant here in town?
So she launched Fire Wings in Fair Oaks. Fire Wings is kind of a chain out here. And then they started a second restaurant as well, same Fire Wings. And so they were doing that for a couple of years. And then during COVID, everything went crazy. So we sold that, got out of that, thank God. It was good for the season it was in. But once we got married, about a year into our marriage, she started feeling the call to get out of the business world and into the ministry world. And I told her, I said, look, if you never work at the church, I'm cool with it. I had no ministry expectations of her.
Right.
I didn't marry an assistant pastor. I married a wife.
Yeah.
So my qualifications for a wife was, can she kiss? And is she my best friend? That's all I care about. I don't need somebody that can preach. But she has a natural gift. The first time she got up to speak, a video that she made with myself on stage hit 20 million views on Instagram, multi-million views on TikTok. It went viral. That just shows the natural gift she has. And so she left the business world about year 2 of our marriage, came full-time, and since then she's been working at the church full-time now. So she leads our Egress ministry, our outreach ministry. She launched Dream Center, which is a part of our ministry. She leads our women's ministry. They're about to have a women's gathering this Friday night. So she's crushing it and is an absolute gift to our church. And I think once she came into ministry with me full time, the church just elevated even more, because now we got mom and dad, and there's just a different dynamic there that just is a blessing that everybody felt. And so it's been really cool.
Oh, that's cool, man.
Yeah.
So you guys have been able to grow in your, actually growing as you were senior pastor.
Yep.
That's interesting.
Yep.
That's different, because that doesn't
Yeah, I was a senior pastor for a few years, about 3 years before I was married.
Right.
And so, and then into that. And so she's gone through the dynamics of like marrying into being a senior pastor's wife and all of the politics and the difficulties of that, and learning that, not being from church. And there's a lot of dynamics there. And so, and she's just handled it with grace. People in our church know that she loves the church. She has no pride or posturing. She is at everything we do, wants to be at everything we do.
Yeah.
She loves ministry. She's not jaded. So it's a blessing. Honestly, it's a blessing.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. One thing that people don't, a lot of times, they don't see, they see us and the, pastors on stage, see ministering, and they don't, because we're in servant operation mode, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's unselfish. We're getting out there in ministry. And so they don't always see behind the scenes, like what pastors carry.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because, it's like when you're a pastor, you check your personal life at the door. Yep. And you're about people. And so it's serving. What have been maybe some personal or maybe a current thing that you guys have been working through in your personal life that, is part of the ministry struggle dynamic that you're just called to and you can't get away from?
Yeah, we definitely have made it a priority to be open books to our church. So we are very upfront about the realities of being people, that we're pastors, and that's a position that we have, and we are extremely grateful for that. But we're also real people, and we love to let people in to know what's going on with us. I share a lot about our personal lives from the stage.
Yeah.
We don't bleed on people. We have a really good marriage. We're extremely blessed. We got married, a little bit later in life, especially, comparatively to my Bible college friends who got married when they were teenagers.
Right.
And it's like, okay, we got married when we were approaching 30 years old. And it's like, we are full adults, we know who we are. And so a lot of that
life
stuff,
experience.
we kind of figured that out. And so we've got a great marriage and we've got a good synergy. But that doesn't mean that we don't walk through challenges. We've been really open with our church over the past few years. We've been walking through infertility for almost 5 years now, about 4 years. And we're going through the IVF process literally this next week, going through a round of IVF, and it's heavy. We see people in our church, being blessed, and we're praying and serving the Lord and serving people, and we're walking through this pain. I think those things are really good to share with people because it lets them know about our humanity. It lets them know that we're not separate from you in having to trust God just like you are trusting God.
Right.
And sometimes things aren't working the way they should be, and we're still praising Him, we're still worshiping Him, we're still serving Him, and we want to be a model for that. I think it's also really important to set boundaries.
Yeah.
While we share parts of our life, we are not the type of pastors that you can waltz into our house at any time unannounced. We guard the intimacy in our marriage. We guard the privacy of our marriage. And so something that I've seen a lot of young pastors fall into the trap of doing is I think they see some pastors that are on big platforms and big stages.
Yeah.
And so they'll do these relationship series and they think that the way to gain an audience or get the respect of the people that are listening is to just put all of their stuff out there.
Right.
And I see pastors prostituting their marriages and their families for the sake of views on Instagram or TikTok to try to go viral.
Dude,
I would just really warn against that. If that's who you are, if you're a gatherer, if you have people in your living room every Friday night and you're just that pastor, we were in Miami at VU Church this past week, and Rich Wilkerson Jr. This is who he naturally is. He's got people around him all the time. He's the bro that's just got people with him. If that's who you are, amazing. But if that's not who you are, don't pretend to be that to try to get clout or to try to get views and to try to here's what you end up doing. You end up selling the intimacy of your marriage for the sake of an online audience. And I'm telling you, I have watched guys destroy their marriages, destroy their families, because they were so intent on gaining this online credibility that they wasted the very personal, private thing that is between a husband and a wife and a family. And it's not worth it. It's not worth it.
You hurt trust in your home.
Yep.
Everything with your kids, with your spouse.
Yep. And so you got to know what, boundary lines are okay with you and your spouse. My wife and I, we have a really good relationship where we make fun of each other to each other's faces. Yeah. And so when I get up and I talk about my wife being messy at home and she talks about me being manic and controlling, we say that to each other, and it's not a passive aggressive, we're going to talk about that later.
Yeah.
If your spouse is like that, don't do it from the stage. Don't go there.
Yeah.
Because you see another couple do that on a podcast does not mean you have permission to do that.
Yeah.
And so the biggest thing I can encourage pastors and leaders to do is be authentically you. Yeah. Don't try to be something because you see, some power couple on Instagram do that in a video.
Yeah.
You don't need to do those things to connect with the people that God's given you in your church.
That's good.
Don't overlook your immediate in-person audience for an online audience. God has people right in front of you. Be who you are, shepherd your flock, and be authentic to the leadership style, the calling that God's given you, and God will draw your people. Because here's what's going to happen. You be something that you're not.
Yeah. You're
going to look up at a church full of people that are not your people, and you're going to be frustrated why the church doesn't look like you and why you don't like showing up on Sunday.
So do you think that's like a real thing right now, to where there's too much performance with pastors putting themselves out there?
Yep, absolutely. I mean, it's not a new thing. We all do it, and it's happened for years.
But it's at another level right now.
It is at another level because of social media and what we can see and how we copy and what works one place. We think we can imitate that. I mean, I've watched pastors preach my literal sermon in their churches without telling me. And listen, look, my copyright is your right to copy. I love it. If it works, that's great. But just because I can do it in my context, in my city, with my church, doesn't mean it's going to work in yours.
Yeah.
And I think you got to be really careful to know when you're imitating the faith. This is something that we it's a cultural value for us at a church. We imitate the faith, but we don't mimic the miracle. I learned this from Pastor Stephen. We want to imitate the faith of people that we aspire to be.
Right.
I love what other churches are doing. That's why we went to Pastors Assembly in VU in Miami, is because I love what they're doing. I want to imitate that faith of taking ground, but I'm not going to mimic your miracle because I'm not in Miami.
Yeah.
And I'm not Rich Wilkerson Jr. I imitate his faith, and I can learn from those leaders, and I want to receive an impartation from those leaders. But at the end of the day, I'm pastoring a church in Elk Grove, California. It's very different, even different from Sacramento City. It's very different. And so I want to make sure that I don't perform and try to reproduce somebody else's fruit in my ministry.
Yeah.
I want to be who God's called me to be.
Yeah. Man, that's so good. I'm so encouraged being around you. I enjoy just hearing your preaching and just your own style. One thing that, just to wrap it up, that I think really explains your heartbeat, the heartbeat of your church, your heartbeat as far as honoring and such, is it was almost a year and a half now after I had left Streamline that we pastored for 15 years. And it was a couple of months after we left, and we had fun because we got to just, I'd never been able to on a Sunday just go to any church I wanted. And so friends, people we knew, it's like, let's go check out their church. Right. We get to do that whenever I wasn't speaking somewhere. And I'll never forget, dude, how I was treated by you and your staff. I called, or I texted you on a Saturday and just said, hey, we're going to come to church tomorrow. We'll be there. And so when we're there, we had someone seat us up at the front with Trin. Mm-hmm. And as we're there, someone brings us some coffee, or Starbucks coffee, right? And so I get it, and I'm looking at it. I'm like, oh, I wonder what they gave me or whatever. And, bro, it's my stinking drink. Mm-hmm. And I mean, like, an Americano with blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, how the heck did they know this, man? And then I found out, this is so dope, Liz, who's on your staff, she had contacted a mutual friend. Somehow she had a connection with someone who had been in my church who didn't know to get my drink. They didn't know it, but they had my daughter's contact they contacted all of that to be able, when I came in that Sunday, to be able to walk up and say, hey, here's your coffee during the service. I get chills when I talk about it right now. Yeah. But you blessed me. And then not only that, to go in the green room afterwards and you guys just showered us with some gifts. And you really blessed me. Man, I get emotional. You really bless us in a time of that transitional season to just honor us. Yeah. And that's just who you are, man. So I really appreciate you. I'm so glad. I've had a lot of fun, man.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
What I was envisioning for a podcast coming in and what I wanted to see and I had a vision for has happened. And
that's great.
I'm glad you're the first one, man. So thanks for joining us.
Well, and I appreciate you, man, for stepping out in faith and doing this. I think it's always scary to start something, especially when it's entirely new. You're building it from the ground up. But I think what you're doing here is needed. And I really pray that even from just the conversation, that somebody, watching this online, that they feel just kind of a wind of encouragement. Hey, I can do this. I'm not alone. And I know that that's what you're building with this. And so just really encourage anybody that's watching this, subscribe, be a part of this, continue to follow with the journey. I know you're going to speak with some leaders that are far better than me. And so, be along for the journey, jump in, comment something, maybe a question or something that, came up during the conversation that maybe you want to learn a little bit more for. I'm sure you'd be able to, reach out or even do a new podcast talking and addressing some of those comments. But, jump in at the ground level. There's something really special that's happening here. And I think, I think it's going to be powerful.
And part of the community and networking that we're developing is, if you, pastors that are out there that you want to just inquire more about what Pastor Jared's doing and his church, et cetera, how can they connect with you on IG?
On Instagram, you can follow me. Jared C.A. Ellis is my Instagram handle, or E2 Church on Instagram, or website e2church.com. YouTube, all of my sermons are there on the E2 Church YouTube account. And so we got stuff everywhere. It won't be hard to find it. It's out there. But if you want to connect, message me on Instagram. Would love to connect. Any pastors, that's definitely my heart.
Yeah. Well, thank you again for being on here. For those of you who are watching and you've joined us and you've stayed all the way to the end, man, I'm so happy that you did. And this is the end of our first episode, Pastors Getting Personal. And hopefully you got to have kind of a personal touch there and experience this time that we had together. Make sure you subscribe and you come back for our next episode. I'm excited for the next guest that I have coming on, and I know you'll be glad to watch. And then the future ones to come, I have some old dogs, man, some guys who have just finished senior pastoring and they're retired and they've been doing it for decades, and just to hear their hearts. So anyway, you'll be encouraged. Anyway, thank you for coming. We'll see you next time on Pastors Getting Personal podcast. This is exactly what I was hoping.
So, hey, everyone, if you enjoyed the podcast, Pastors Getting Personal podcast, do me a huge favor. This is how you move the mission forward and help and encourage more pastors. Is would you please subscribe to this and like whatever platform you're on? Subscribe to it. And then if you could even get the word out, share it, whether it's on social media for others to jump in and watch, or it's you're just sending a link over to a friend to watch it. But this is a ministry. It's not so much to try and just have something out there, another podcast, but man, to really just see a difference made in the community of lead pastors. And so anyway, check it out or like it and subscribe it and send it out. Help us and be a part of it. All right. God bless you.